There we go. Hi,
All
everyone.
right.
Elizabeth Heffner here, and I have my good friend Tracie Adkins. And we met in the therapy world at our hospital job. And then eventually she decided to try Plexus, and here we are. So I'm so happy to hear her expertise. She actually has a lot of leadership experience in the real world. Um, and in the Plexus world. And so I'm excited to hear from you. And then just as a reminder, you guys, we have Max Out Your Life, Ed Milet, starting next week. And I can't remember like I cannot exactly remember, but we're doing it over 2 weeks. Actually, I can tell you on 6/3, we're doing chapters 1 through 4. And then on 6/10, the week before convention, we will do chapter 5 through the very end. So super tiny book, totally doable to get to, big writing, tiny book, not that big, and super thin. So this is going to be great to leading up to convention, especially when we're all extra busy before then and all of that. So there you go. Just that's our friendly reminder.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So Elizabeth had asked me to kind of speak on three things that really stuck out to me. All of John Maxwell books are filled with so much information and such good nuggets, but this chapter 10, he's talking about how to develop leaders and the different characteristics of leaders and that sort of thing. And now I've lost my page. All right. So one of the first things that really stuck out to me was on page. Oops. Well, on 264, he does talk about where all your influence comes from, like the person's character, the relationship, knowledge, all of those characteristics in there. And I just really started thinking about like my team and the people I know and what they like. Yashana is one of my team members, love her to death. And I sit down and I started thinking about her character and who she is and her strengths and different things. And it made me actually look at her in a different way than just my old high school friend. So I think it's really neat to be able to sit down and actually look at other people on your team and in your world to see who they truly are and what influence they can bring to any situation, and including our plexus. Um, so then the next thing was on page 266, and he's talking about how leaders need to add value. We hear this all the time in all of our calls, and even they're talking about on our posts how we need to add value to the community in general, our team. And he talked about the difference between takers and givers that are leaders. The leaders that are takers are more about what can I get out of this? What can they do for me? Where a giver is what am I going to be able to do for them? How can I help them to proceed and get better and to grow? And that would be adding the value to your team. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, and then he switched over to how leaders are finishers. This one for me really hit hard because I made a post today in the team page about being a perfectionist. And really, that's just our way of hiding back from doing something because we're scared and nervous. And so we don't follow through. And that was what this kind of talked about, where he had a quote from author Kenneth Blanchard that said, "There's a difference between interest and commitment. When you are interested in doing something, you do it only when it's convenient. When you're committed to it, you accept no excuses, only results." And being a busy therapist and working as a manager, I do tend to find where I'll say, oh, well, once I get this perfect, I'll do it. Or I don't have time because of work, or I will find I will use excuses. And so then it's like, okay, am I really truly as committed as I need to be? And so I thought that's something we all should really be asking ourselves when we get in those little ruts. Okay, am I doing the steps I need to? Am I being interested, or am I going to be committed and actually take the action steps? So I know personally I do struggle in that area sometimes. And thankfully I've got Elizabeth and Rochelle and even Jade has been so good about helping me, and Jackie, to try to get through some of those things. So always have that in the back of your mind that you have a great team support to help you with that. Um, So that brings me to the last thing that I am going to do personally. They talked about, there's a little box on the bottom of page 267 where it's who are your leaders and trying to figure out who your leaders are. And he lists all the different 7 characteristics of the leaders: the catalyst, influencer, relationship builder, gatherer, value adder, and opportunist and finisher. I'm going to sit down and make a list of all the people I've talked to who I want to talk to about the business, looking at my team even, and figure out which characteristics all these people have. Because once you realize who's got those characteristics, you're going to see who your leaders are and who you can help, develop and build and help them to maybe see more of it in themselves if they're not. So that was just something that I took from the chapter. But there's, so much more, but I want everybody else to have a chance, and also Elizabeth. So anyways, so that's what I found.
Thank you. I loved all of your points for sure. And I really appreciate you taking the time to prepare and help us out here for sure. And, um, Tracie has very strong organizational skills and she's very disciplined in that. And that definitely aids in her leadership, both in PT world and Plexus world, sorry, OT world, management world. And, those are things that he even talks about, like how do you develop people? Well, you help them know their strengths and you develop those strengths. And that really stuck out to me. He talks about giving people a place to practice their leadership. And I can't imagine, like, I don't know how else you could practice being a leader other than Plexus, because there's no failing, right? Like you're really just saying, hey, let's figure this out together. Hey, let's take our pink drinks together. Hey, let's plan an event and fumble through it together or whatever, And I mean, honestly, and using like I said, like using Tracie's organizational skills to say, hey, like let's do this event. What do we need to do? Like I don't plan parties, you guys. Like I'm no, I'm not a party planner. I'm not an event planner. Like that stuff stresses me out. And so this is where we can use each other's strengths, right? And then talking about how we can use coaching to improve. So what do? We say, hey, like, let's get on a coaching call, fill out a coaching sheet. Let's talk about this, let's get through this together. And you coach people to be a better leader. And then that's developing your leadership. So what does he say? How do you become a better leader of leaders? You grow your leadership lid. You become a better leader. And that comes through these skills that he's talking about too, with self-awareness, being a good leader of ourselves, having empathy, developing our people skills, having emotional intelligence. Well, how do you develop emotional intelligence? You look at how you react to things. He talks about how negativity spreads, and we don't want negative people. A person that's negative or not a leader, they're going to use every opportunity they can to throw gasoline on the fire. And your leaders are the ones throwing water on the fire. And then looking for those people that are like your normal people, right? Like in the workplace, I think a lot of people are working or have had these full-time jobs or whatever. And so you're looking for the coworkers that are throwing water on these situations and not gasoline. Those are the leaders that you're looking for. You're looking for people that are leaders, even if they're not in a leadership role, right? So I think, and the other way that you can find leaders is doing like volunteer work. And he's talked about this in other books and things, and we've talked about it, but not necessarily. I don't remember reading that in this chapter, but that way you're being exposed to people and finding people that have those skills too, right? Because Yashana, like you're kind of the head of your shop, like you don't have a bunch of coworkers. And so if you wanted to kind of expand that opportunity to find more leaders, like, or in your church or in your Bible study group, whatever that looks like for you can be really valuable. So I love that he just really talks about being a hope dealer, being that vision caster, helping people have that self-belief, right? And I think that really comes out in coaching calls and stuff too, when we can coach, when you can get on a call with your leader, when you can get on these book clubs, like we can call out each other's strengths and you can say, hey, this is something you're really good at. Let's really hone in on that. And then just harnessing that and continuing to build that. So, what did I want to say here? That chart. Oh, yeah, I talked about that. Okay. The chart of how to find your 20%, like how do you actually find these leaders that you're supposed to be spending time with, like finding the people that are passionate and excited, finding people that are teachable, are coachable, and we all have people that maybe are excited and passionate, but they might not be coachable, where you're like, hey, don't hit the share button. Let's make sure that you copy that and paste it into your own and take a selfie. Like, if people aren't doing these basic things that we know work, that like that is the system. You cast vision. Fallon talked about this on Monday Night Call last week. You get them on the phone, you cast a vision, you have them post a selfie. Like, if people are excited but just hitting share, 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 then you're kind of stuck a little bit there. You can give them the tools, you can tag them, you can say, hey, watch this video. And we don't give up on those people, but they're probably not in that top 20%. And then that capacity, like what is their potential? And he talks about all these great qualities, right? Like looking for people with that self-awareness, emotional intelligence. He went over that whole thing, empathy, people skills. And these are not like nice to have in a person. These are, you must have these in order to be an effective leader. And it doesn't mean that these skills can't be developed, right? Like we can all develop those skills. Emotional intelligence, I was going to touch on that. And that if someone has a difficult time with that emotional intelligence, it's really getting them to put themselves out of that comfort zone. He talks a lot about that. Like, how do you get people out of their comfort zone? And if they can't do it online, if they can't do it on social media, then have them join a tough workout class. Like my gym, you can go to my gym for a week for free. Get somebody into something that is uncomfortable for them, that's going to push the limits. And that's a physical kind of like grit development that can overflow into emotional intelligence, but there's also like so many books on building emotional intelligence. The Rewiring Your Brain, Caroline Leaf, right? Somebody check me. And then the Building Bounce book. The Building Bounce is super tiny. So Caroline Leaf gets really, really technical, really, really wordy, and I understand the irony in me saying that. But the Building Bounce book is super small, literally has a volleyball bouncing on the front of it. So there's books that you can recommend to people too to help with that. So anyway, those were kind of some key points that really stood out to me. And just, he even just talks about like when there's broken trust, like what do you do? Like you have to give them opportunity to build that back. It takes time, it takes that consistency, but it can happen. Like, and I like too how he reflects when somebody does like isn't growing as a leader or does something that's not ideal, like, well, what is it that I can do differently? And we talked about this earlier in the book too, kind of in that conflict resolution. Like we think, like that's me. I'm like, okay, what did I do? What could I have done differently? Maybe I should have said this. Like, what did I do to make this situation? And then there are times where we definitely have to reflect that, but also not like wait too long to deal with this situation. So kind of finding that balance there. There's one more point I wrote down. Hold on. I think it was when people refuse to, I'm so sorry. Anyway, it basically was like when people like they aren't growing, they aren't putting that effort in, they kind of just won't grow, they don't want to grow, they say they do, but they don't do anything towards that growth. Like it's kind of, that's when you're like, okay, like let them go. Oh, here. Oh, no, that isn't. Anyway. And then I guess the other key point, this is my last one, then we'll open it up to discussion. But when you say like, how do I know when someone's ready to take on those leadership things? And it's like, you kind of just let them go. Like, and that's the other beauty of Plexus is that, okay, you say, hey, Yashana, I need you to lead book club. And she's like, I can't lead book club. And I'm like, yes, you can. And she's like over here freaking out. And okay, she did amazing. Like we all know Yashana did amazing. She started this book with us, right? But what if she fumbled? What if whatever? It doesn't matter. Like, so what, right? This is the perfect place to fumble through a book club or a call or a presentation or a whatever. This is your safe place to do that. And then to look back and say, hey, like, I could have said this, or I would have liked to have said that, or hey, Elizabeth, or hey, Tracie, like, what else could I do here, right? Um, so my point is that this is the opportunity where we can say, go do it and see what happens. I mean, obviously, we're gonna do things together. We prepare, we say, here's the video to watch, to be prepared. Okay, now write your notes, show me your notes. Okay, now let's go lead the event, right? And that's also why we do book clubs together. So if Tracie was like totally drawing a blank or something, I could be like, oh, I got 2 pages of notes. Like, let me help for a minute until she could gather her thought and you move on. Like, no one would even know, right? Like, no one would even know. So I really appreciated all of these tips. So anyway, let me hear what y'all had to say. Would love to hear that too.
Okay, I'll go. So I definitely needed to read this book because I do struggle with leadership aspects. I was a manager at McDonald's for, gosh, 11 years. So I always thought that was leadership. And then I guess when I started getting into these books and book club, I discovered that's not leadership because John Maxwell's kind of definition is leaders influence people to follow while managers focus on maintaining systems and processes, which is more of what I did. And so I'm learning a lot in this. And I was talking to Tracie about this yesterday, as far as listening to John Maxwell, Eric Worre, you can't be successful unless other people are successful with you. Unless you make other people successful, you won't be successful. So I've really been thinking about that a lot. And Eric Worre had a talk on pessimists, realists, and visionaries. And I'm more of the realist person. I've struggled with that visionary. I've always kind of been like, oh, I'm content. I don't need anything more. I've always kind of been that mindset. And I've always struggled with that visionary portion where my husband's like a complete visionary. He just goes for it, goes for big goals and everything. So I'm trying to flip my mindset to get into that thought process and everything. So that's been probably my main takeaways from these chapters, this chapter in this book.
I love that. And I also think I don't want you to discount your time as a manager at McDonald's. Like, I imagine you had a very wide range of people that you were leading. And so that is not for the faint of heart. And that's not easy, right? Because you have people from all different backgrounds, you have people of different ages and different generations. And we know that there's a difference in how different generations perceive work and work ethic and what they're willing to invest in and different things. And so I definitely can tell you that you were more than a manager. I know that because I know you. And so don't discount like, oh, I was only a manager, I wasn't a leader, and so therefore I don't have leadership skills, because that's not true. But I do agree that I mean, look at like a hospital situation, right? There's this middle management, there's upper management, and it's that middle management isn't there to necessarily do a lot of leading. They're there to enforce those systems. And I think that's kind of where Tracie has been stuck, and stuck because her hands are tied, right? And I'm sure, Yashana, your hands were tied at certain situations because you're like, we could do this and, be a team like this and move like this, but you didn't have that freedom from up above or whatever. I mean, I definitely think you had this like leadership eyeball on situations. And so now you get to put it into practice, right? Like, and all of that experience that you had. And Tracie, you've definitely, you've shared different stories, so I don't want to take words out of your mouth, and you can share more specifically, but you've brought like, hey, because I read this book, I was able to go to my manager, as a manager, go to my manager and say, hey, and and do it with the skill that you learned, not just with a fiery attitude, like could be a temptation by some of us. And I definitely will say Plexus has helped me with that too. Like I had a situation, it was a while ago now, and I was like up to here. And I know, I mean, over the years, my tolerance has grown a ton, right? For situations, for people, for having grace with situations, for understanding people's stress levels, all of that. And I was like, this is not how I will be treated. Like, this is not okay. You are supposed to have my back. You're my supervisor. And like, I don't trust you. And I had to go to and higher up than that person to say, this is what I'm concerned about. Like, this is leadership. What I'm experiencing is not, and it's not okay because it's going to come back on me. I'm going to be the fall guy, y'all. I'm the peon PT over here. I'm not in your situation. I'm not an admin. And so, having the skill to say, these are my concerns and things like that. And I definitely don't think if I didn't have Lexus and have a community of support and have books and, have this personal growth track, I really don't think I would have been able to handle that situation as well. So, and I know, Rochelle, you've been in these situations too.
Absolutely. Like the personal growth books have helped so much. Even today, I was filling in at a nursing home here, and I've been working like a couple days here and there because they have a PTM maternity leave, and there was a situation that came up. And the director of rehab there she's 25, so she's fairly a new graduate out of school. Had a situation with a different employee, and she came to me for like advice for it, and I was able to offer her some advice based on the book that we are reading. And actually I offered for her to borrow the book now that I'm done with it. But you know when you're young and you have that middle management, not even when you're young, like any age, but the middle management, she's there to follow the processes like Elizabeth said, but you also have your team there with you that you also need to learn how to lead and grow and bring up with you. And if you can develop leaders on your team, it makes the managing the processes easier because they have raised their leadership lid and can then follow it. But anyways, that's kind of going off the topic of the chapters that we just read. I really love the recognizing the characteristics of a leader in people. Not only do you need to recognize who has these characteristics, but what they are and how the value they can add. Because everyone has these, not everybody has the full list of characteristics, right? Like we all have it to an extent, but like our top 5 are, our biggest ones. And everyone should have different top 5s because we're all individuals. And together, based on my strengths, based on Elizabeth's strengths, based on Tracie's strengths, Kat's strengths, Jade's strengths, everyone's strengths, they all complement each other to make the team stronger and wholer. So if we focus on what we do, our characteristics of our strengths and what we do best, together the team will be solid and grow from there.
I love that. It's really great. For sure. Just, I think we talk about this a lot, and how we can all complement one another because where I lack in organization, I have people that can pick that up, or where I am stronger in, I don't know, being loud, then other people can like harness behind me, right? And be like, yeah, what she said, or whatever the case is. So, really, really interesting. It's not every day I'm out of words, is it? I like too how he says that like just staying away of your strongest players. I think this used to overwhelm me a lot in the beginning. Like, how am I going to lead people? How am I going to lead people? I'm only a silver or I'm only a gold or whatever. And it was like, you know what? But I don't have to lead like a diamond. I need to lead like a senior gold. I need to lead like a ruby. I need to lead like an emerald. Like I could take those steps up in that leadership and it really just knowing, like, you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know it all. It's just taking that one extra step of leadership and focusing on one thing that we can improve on as a leader before we decide to, you know, get overwhelmed or try to do all of it all at one time. Like, okay, maybe I need to learn to be a better listener. I've had to do that multiple times in my life. And so taking like, okay, I'm going to focus all week on being a better listener than a talker, and not to just talk, not listen to respond, right? Listen to understand, listen to have empathy, not have a listen just so I know what I want to say next, right? And putting that into practice in our daily life then puts that skill into place with Plexus. And he didn't mention it, probably because it's not his book. I don't know, but the strength, you mentioned it in the chat, didn't you? The strength-based leadership, right? So if we can remember our top strengths, remember, we talk about this all the time, that you don't play in your weaknesses. That's not where you spend 80% of your time. You spend 80% of your time in your strengths. And then the skills that we need to do to develop to be successful in our leadership here and leadership in Plexus or whatever, you know what I mean? I hope you know what I mean. Then you spend a little bit of time developing those skills, those weaknesses. You develop them, because you can't have a Plexus business and not like talk to people, right? Like you cannot. You have to talk to people, so you have to develop that. Maybe you're better in writing. Maybe that's maybe one of your stronger suits, right? In communicating in writing, but you still have to learn how to talk to people. But it doesn't mean that you can't send out killer messages, right? So anyway, just playing in your strengths, using your strengths, knowing your strengths. And I'm gonna actually talk about that on this was like perfect chapter to have along with leading call tonight. So it all works out, but definitely keeping those top 5 strengths in mind. But we should probably wrap up. Does anybody have, because I got to jump on the other Zoom, but does anybody have anything else that they wanted to share? Oh, Kat, you're so cute. Thanks for talking in the chat too, Kat. I saw a few comments pop up. Aw. Awesome. All right, you guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you on the next call.